No. I was in the front of us.
Okay. Let's do some meditation, my friends. I can definitely use a little bit of deep breathing right now after this week. I don't know about the rest of you. Just get yourself started by relaxing your body, putting your feet on the floor. Breathe out. Breathe out. So today what we're going to focus on is feeling someone else's pain. Most of the time, we're taught for good reason that it's good to empathize with a person and recognize their pain when you see them that way. And that's true. But there are moments in time where that can become a little much. To be thinking about it so much that we can't do it anymore. So the mantra I'm going to use this morning is from a musician. Her name is Ali Halpert. And if you like this melody, you can look it up on YouTube later. The first part of the song goes like this. The song is called Loosen. It's all in English. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Think about the words of that song for a moment. Think about a time, maybe it's today, maybe it was a few years ago, where you felt a weightiness of responsibility that isn't necessarily yours alone, that just felt too much to bear. Imagine how your body felt in that moment. Imagine how your mind felt in that moment, where every second of every day you felt the weight of that problem on your shoulders, regardless of whether or not anyone ever asked you or demanded of you. Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. It might make you uncomfortable to be hearing someone suggest that you should let go. After all, there are a lot of problems in the world, in our neighborhoods, and in our country, and you might ask yourself, well, what's wrong with feeling the pain of someone else? And the answer is, in theory, nothing. But in practice, we've all been there at some point where we've felt so much of someone else's pain that we can't do anything else. Empathy is so strong that we want to reach out and help, but the pain, their pain has consumed us. And that's not good for anybody. Because if even people who are not directly in that amount of pain can't rely on other people to care about them enough to do something to help, then the problem just gets worse. Psychologists call this empathic distress. It's where I watch something, I see the fires happening out in Los Angeles and in Southern California. I see all the people who are being devastated by these fires, and I feel so much pain that I don't take the time to donate money or to offer my spare room to someone whose house just burned down. There's a threshold that you can cross where you're no longer using that sense of empathy to do anything. You're just becoming another victim. Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bone. Let go. Think for a moment about a burden that you feel from someone else. I'd recommend not thinking about one for someone, that you're very responsible for every day. It's one thing to feel that sense of empathy and that pain because the person you love or your children or your parents need that kind of care for you. But think about someone or a group of people who's just far away enough that you're not actually in the situation with them, but close enough that you have some idea of how they must be feeling. Feel the weight of that person's pain on your shoulders. And try to imagine what it feels like to loosen it, to give yourself a break, not to ignore your responsibility, but to develop enough clarity that you might take some responsibility. Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bone. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bone. Let go, let go, let go. Take a deep breath in, and we're going to do about a 10-minute sit and silence. Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. When you feel ready, you can take some deep breaths and open your eyes. No rush. There are some different faces in here than when I closed my eyes about 15 minutes ago. It's good to see all of you. Welcome to Open Door Shabbat. Welcome to ACI. It's 10:28. Just to give people a chance for 2-3 minute bio break. You should grab one blue book, one red book from the back. And I'm so delighted that you're here. Sorry? Oh, yes, the first time here. Well, we also once I had dinner. Oh, you're at the admins, okay. Okay. Getting so pessimistic on what turnout we're going to have this morning with the cold and the snow. So. So for those who, many people have been here before, some have not, but once a month here at ACI, we do Open Door Shabbat, which is much more focused on depth rather than breadth. We try to go as, we try to better understand what's going on in the prayer book so that we're not just rushing through a bunch of Hebrew words that we don't understand. The cycle I do is we go through each part of the service, and then when we're done each part, then we go back through them and just do different parts each time. So we just keep churning and churning and churning, and maybe one day we'll feel like we understand all of it, but that is very unlikely. Today we're going to focus on one prayer, which is on page 108. The prayer is known as it's called El Adon, El is just a word for God, and Adon is like a word for master. So it's just like God the master. Sometimes these titles are not nearly as interesting when you translate what they mean as what it sounds like. But the prayer is called El Adon. If you're here on Shabbat morning, you probably hear it, but it's not something, a prayer that gets really studied all that much. I want us to look at a little bit about why. This is not to discourage anyone from studying it, but that it's not one that I feel like people know particularly well. Like a lot of prayers, it's actually a prayer that we sing always. So sometimes the prayers that we sing, we sneakily think that we know what they're about, but we don't really know what they're about because we're busy singing. What?
Singing in Jewish.
Yeah.
And some people don't understand Jewish.
Yeah, also true. Also true. So I'm just gonna just read 108 in English quietly. So, looking at this prayer in English, or if you could make your way through a little bit of the Hebrew, tell me about the person that you think would have written such a prayer. Like, this prayer is definitely not from the Torah. It was written by a human being. So if it was written by a human being, there has to be a reason that they decided to write it. So why would someone wake up one day and write a prayer like this? Steph?
I wonder if they were going, or it was written in a time when things were really not going well for the Jews. So this is kind of like a reminder prayer of how good things can be or should be.
Interesting. Can you say more a little bit about that? I never thought of it this way. So, like, what?
I just have a lot of wild guess. I have no idea about it. But it seems like it's reminding you of how good all of these different creations are. And I'm just wondering if it was written in a time when things were not, didn't seem so good on the surface. So this could be kind of a reminder.
Oh, interesting. So it's kind of like going back to almost first principles. Like it's a beautiful world out there. Just because there are lots of things that happen in that world every day that are not so beautiful, it's still a pretty beautiful world. Anyone else?
I think it was written by an assembly of Jews.
An assembly, okay?
Of Jews, yes. And I think that the Jews' prayer and rebuke and have a lot of money.
Okay, all right. Janet?
I like the idea of it being a reminder. I do think about it in the context of like, oh, something bad was happening, but it's like, let's just take a pause for a minute and think about why we're doing this, why we're praying. This is what God is about. This is what's around God. This is why we do it.
Nice. Litza?
This is more reiterating or expanding the question than answering it, but it makes me wonder, why does someone choose to write another one? Like, what is different about this?
Yeah, it's a fair question. How many different ways can you say, you know, what in many ways can feel like the same thing?
And is there anything in here that's different, that like stands out as not like the quite identical in the same vein as many other?
Did you identify one of those things? Did you identify anything that?
I do not have such deep familiarity.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, let's talk about the bad news first, because there are a lot of things in here that definitely come up in other prayers, right? References to creation, references to filling the universe, stars and lights and all of these things. So Litza makes a great point. This is not the first time, nor the last time, nor the second time. There are lots of times where you're going to hear things like this. So what exactly makes it different? This is kind of an open question. Steph?
I was just gonna say that made me look back at the Hebrew, and the only thing I noticed that's different is that every line starts with that first letter of the alphabet.
Yeah, so that is one so in one sense what's different about this is that there are a lot of prayers that are acrostics that go through the Hebrew alphabet. And so that in some sense makes it different. Interestingly, there's a prayer that many people know there's a more commonly known Jewish prayer that we also recite that is like acrostic, although it's missing one letter. Anyone know what prayer that is? Yeah, it's the Ashrei. Now that also is an acrostic, although for some reason it excludes one letter of the alphabet. This one does not. So, symbolically for people who wrote these poems, acrostics were ways of, it was also its own symbol because going from A to Z is almost like putting it all together. Yes.
Yes, I feel it's a gift
You feel what's a gift?
to learn the Bible and prayer.
I agree.
Because the Jewish words of the Bible is a gift.
Absolutely, I agree. So this is a reference book I keep I keep it at home actually, called My People's Prayer Book. It sort of like allows you to go through these texts. And I hadn't looked in a while about who wrote this prayer or like what it comes from. So, but this is like gives you the sort of background about where these prayers come from. And the answer is that this book, this prayer, was composed by Jewish mystics known as Yordei Merkabah. We'll come back to what Merkabah is in a moment. Whose non-rational approach to Judaism was anathema to many modern prayer book editors. This is from a rabbi who died a few years ago named David Ellenson, who was a Reform rabbi. But when I first kind of looked at this prayer deeply, my initial reaction was, this is like astrology. The moon cycles and the stars aligning. It has very much kind of that feel towards it, and we sort of forget sometimes that Judaism is not without astrology. It's definitely there. And these Merkava, anyone know what the Merkava is? No? Okay. The Merkava is, there's the story of Elijah the prophet. And Elijah the prophet is known for many things. He's one of only a few people in the entire Hebrew Bible who it never says dies. That's sort of like one of the things he's famously known for. And the story of how he doesn't die is basically that he's doing his prophet thing, and this fiery chariot, this Merkava, basically picks him up and flies him up into the sky. But it never actually says he dies. So you never see him again, but it also never says that he dies. So there's like huge mysticism around this chariot, you know. And so I think part of the reason we don't study this is because it's one of those kind of things that, you know, in 2025 doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to us. Yes?
Back then, when the Bible was prayer, the Jews wrote the Bible for prayer. They used to come amongst the people, but Pharaoh and his men felt that they should be whipped. And that's not something we should practice today in 2025, that people need to be whipped. I feel that that's sin to whip people, even children.
I agree with you. That's actually what we're going to read next week.
And parents.
Next week we're going to read that. Next week we start that story. Next week is the first chapter of Exodus.
I've been to a Bible study here before, or in the other room.
Cool. Well, it's interesting, right? Because so what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that, you know, there's a lot of things in the Bible, in the Torah, in prayer books that, like, not only do we not believe, we almost don't want to believe that anyone ever believed them before. Like, meaning the Bible doesn't really have a lot of problems with slavery. It doesn't like that the Israelites are enslaved, but it's not really rejecting slavery because there's lots of rules about how the Israelites should treat their own slaves. So we don't like that fact for good reason. We have no desire for there to be that kind of slavery ever again. I think we're also uncomfortable about the fact that it sort of was there at all. Right? Like, even though it's one thing to acknowledge that it was that was then, this is now, but to then say, to even acknowledge that it was there doesn't make us feel that great. And so this is one of those other things where, you know, okay, like, I didn't realize that the stars and Venus and Jupiter and all of that kind of stuff that I would see in horoscopes in the back of a newspaper, that actually has a thing there. But I'm curious if anyone wants to speak in defense of it. Like, why? Because it's in our prayer book. Like, I'm not going to stop having us say it, even though it's about things that can kind of feel a little much. Lynn? Oh, I like that. Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah? Oh, no? What's that?
Astrology is certainly having a moment in the contemporary world today. People talk about it a lot. We talked about it a lot at the time this prayer was written. And it may be just an attempt or a continuing way to integrate the folk attempts that find new meaning with the religious structures.
Sure. Yeah.
Offer something to people that they already find interesting and have it in their prayer book as well.
Nice. I like that. Janet?
things shining, and I don't know, it just was like kind of a way of describing things and describing, you know what I mean? It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, so that's what's really.
Yes.
Yes, I'm Ralph. Hello, everybody. I say that astrology and the stars belong in the sky. And Moses and his disciples, was the ones who seen the burning fire of the word of God and put them on the tablets.
Thank you. I picked this prayer to study this week because it was speaking to me in a certain way with what's going on in California,
The fires.
with the fires. Now, you might say, well, this is about the beauty of creation, and that is not the beauty of that is not, you know, fires can be beautiful under some circumstances, not under these circumstances. You know, there's a synagogue that I know people who grew up at it, and the rabbi that burned to the ground out in Pasadena. So there's nothing beautiful about that kind of fire, and we've all seen other fires that are just they're not beautiful either. But I think, you know, what's interesting to me about the astrology of all of this is sort of that the hardest thing about reading a prayer book today is we definitely live in a moment where we want to identify what can make these prayers feel rational to us. And we also discard, that's why certain flavors of Judaism discard things that just don't seem rational to include there, right? So like, last night I spoke at a Reformed temple about organ donation from a day job, right? And you know, like their prayer book doesn't have this because they removed a lot of things in their prayer books that feel like are not that feel just sort of outside of a modern belief system. They also don't say that God resurrects the dead, you know, and there's like definitely some validity to it. What I like to think about when I read this particular prayer though is just because I want things to be rational and I try to do that doesn't mean that I really understand how it all works. Like to me, that to me is what when I see those pictures of those fires or see it on video, what I think to myself is, you know, human beings have no idea about the unintended consequences of all the things that we do to this big, beautiful thing that we all live on, you know. And even if you, I happen to believe that God was involved in creating it, but even if you don't, it's still way beyond all of our understanding. And so even sometimes trying to understand it makes us think that we're even like 5% of the way to fully understanding it, and we're not. We're not. It's like you think about the ocean. Like the ocean, I think that I read somewhere that like we have explored less than 5% of the ocean. Think about how much of the world is covered in ocean, and we only understand 5% of it. So to me, whether you believe God's involved in that or not, I do think it is sobering to think about how little we all really understand about it. So how dare we be so uncareful with what we do with all of that, because we just don't know the unintended consequences of that. Yeah, Anna?
Sounds like what I'm getting from this is like, you know, we prefer rationalism now, in part because it gives us a sense of control. And much like in this poem, and the acceptance that the stars have control over us, we also have to accept that even though we might not think the stars are controlling us, that we do lack a lot of control.
Yeah, I mean, just because we want to try and understand it as factually correct as possible, like there's a long road to understanding all of the facts about it. One that we're probably not going to reach, but sometimes we act like we do. And by we, I mean like just humanity acts like. I know I've made this reference several times now that like, you know, the planet can burp us all out and not think about it. Like, you know, the danger of climate change is not about the planet. The danger is about us. If we don't fix climate change, the world will essentially burp us out. And the world will still be here. The earth will still be here. We might not be here. The same, I read a book recently about like nuclear war. I know, like really uplifting topic, but like it was written by like a woman, her name's Annie Jacobson. It was sort of like running through what exactly could happen to lead to nuclear annihilation. Now, why am I bringing this up in this other very uplifting topic? Because she talks about in the last, you know, chapter about like what it must have been like, you know, for the dinosaurs on the day that their world was just completely destroyed. Like it was, you know, like they're, you know, she's like, we can't imagine that, but the world was still here. Her point was like, you know, we have these weapons that can kill like hundreds of millions of people, you know, in the blink of an eye. And it's not going to destroy the world. It's going to destroy us. And so, you know, that just shows like how little we really get about it, that we really get about it all. So while it does not necessarily mean that I'm going to look for my moon cycle or like what my horoscope is saying tomorrow, it is I find it very powerful to say, I don't really get most of this. So why maybe be a little careful before assuming that I can just, you know, and I'm not someone who actually has all that much power to do that kind of damage, but there are people who can do all kinds of damage to the world in that way. Yes, Ralph.
I have to say that in prayer, we could be good and learn to respect people, male or female, children. And I'd have to say that I don't want to take us back to the time of Adam and Eve with one woman that'll tempt me by the fruit.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go back to that time either. There's, yeah, I'm with you on it. It's a tough balance, right? Because I think the point, what I was taking from this prayer in reciting it this week, is to say to myself, look, you know, I can want to understand things in a fact-based way without believing that means that I understand the whole picture. You know, because look, many people are very comfortable when they ask, like, why do you believe what you believe about Judaism or any religion? They say, well, you know, these are myths. These are things that people had to come up with to make sense of things they did not understand, right? And then eventually we come and say, well, it's just a myth, right? It's just a myth, so it's not actually what happened, and that may be true. But that's not the same thing as saying that you now understand it. That just means that option may not stand up to scrutiny, but it's not the same thing as saying you understand. And that kind of humility, I think, kind of gets lost sometimes. So when I recite El Adon, that's sort of what I like to think about.
And prayer.
What?
And prayer.
And prayer, absolutely. By the way, welcome. Good morning, Nalia. Good morning, Amanda. Page 108. We're on. Just like just walk in. Any other? I saw a hand that was being raised. No? Oh, Alyssa, please.
I mean, I agree with all the things you're talking about. I think there's few places in our world today that we can go to seek out connection with irrational things and connection with the mindset of people who had the same brains and the same motivations that we do now, thousands of thousands of years ago. And I think that's what's powerful about staying connected to religion, is to be reminded of these mysteries that do form the majority of the universe that we experience, and be reminded of the ways that all the generations that came before us were grappling with them, and that we're not any smarter or better than they were. But we're in a modern world that likes to throw away a lot of things and dismiss the things that came before it. And I think that our medical systems are superior to it. And I think it's, like you said, this is a way to stay connected to the humility. We're being reminded that we have just access to a fraction of understanding.
Yeah. And how many opportunities we can have at times to make it right and don't take it. I mean, I was born after Jimmy Carter was president. I'm showing my youth and inexperience here. Right, but obviously there's been a lot of stories about Jimmy Carter this week, and there's this famous kind of anecdote about how Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House in the late 70s. And he actually gave like some very passionate speeches about like, if we don't get this right, our planet's going to be in like deep doo-doo. Then he lost the election. The panels get taken off the White House. It's not the only, I don't want to blame his successor for that, because there's other moments where we could choose like not to, but his point was, we don't, this is going to come back to bite us if we don't get at it early enough. And my, oh my, is it coming back to bite us? And yeah, I mean, so before, if a thousand years ago, someone was saying it because they worry that the planets are going to be aligned in the wrong way and it's just going to make everything horrible, but they sort of actually believed it. There's something, I feel a little nostalgia for that in a moment, if it were to mean we didn't do certain things where we had the option to like take a different pathway. Steph?
Also wondering, like, kind of the flip side of what you said, like, there's something comforting about the fact that, not the astrology piece, but like, just that the constant wondering and trying to find answers to these questions has persisted throughout time. There's something very reassuring in the uncertainty, but there's always been that uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, that's very much true. I mean, some of you have maybe at some point in your life heard this phrase from the late Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel about how like you should live your life in what he called radical amazement. I see people nodding that you've maybe heard this before. It's a common. Many rabbis have used it in many a sermon at many points in time. It's a really good quote for a reason. Heschel was also like an early environmentalist. And I think part of what he was saying by amazement was, just because we can, don't lose your sense of amazement about how all of this fits together on this earth, because once you stop being amazed by it, then you start thinking that it's just like a throwaway sort of thing that you can do whatever you want for it. And I think part of the reason he used the word amazement and why it caught on was he wanted to come up with a way to recognize that people want to understand things, they want to know things, and we shouldn't demean that part, but the idea that you can still be amazed by it is enough of a check on your desire to just conquer and plunder the creation. Yes, Ralph.
I agree with something she was saying about the stars, but here it says purity, it says love, it says wisdom, and it says amidst the world. And that's part of a good, decent prayer to keep us healthy. I mean, we can't take on by itself with the stars doing everything, but those things are little. You can show a little love and purity, wisdom in the midst of the world. And
Sure.
you can show a little love.
Yeah.
That's what makes the world go around. The world loves.
Well said. Well said. Thanks. Lynn?
I was wondering, maybe what would you say about between the secular desire to understand everything about the world and I guess the rabbinic attempts to understand everything in the Torah or the Bible? Just attitudinally, would you say it's different? I mean,
Well, there's definitely differences. There's differences, I guess, about the assumptions that people might make about it. Like, meaning, you know, I think I've mentioned before that I deliberately chosen college to study philosophy so that I would study with atheists for all of my undergraduate studies. I did that by choice. Not that there's anything wrong with being an atheist if anyone here is an atheist. I'm just saying that for someone who knew he was going to become a rabbi, I thought it would be good to immerse myself in people who would make me write papers about why God doesn't exist, of which I wrote several. They would say that, there's lots of things we don't understand. Just because I don't believe God doesn't exist doesn't mean I understand everything. It's just that I think that eventually there has to be an answer for things that fits within the boundaries of what we would call, science or the rules of how the world works. I don't have to say that it's all powerful. I don't have to assume that it always eventually involves an all-powerful being. It could just be that eventually I can understand it, even if I don't understand it now. So I guess I would say that's probably the difference. The rabbis are assuming that at some point that's where you get people who believe in creationism versus natural selection. Creationism is basically trying to make an argument that all this stuff can have scientific properties, but above all of it is a God who made it in 7 days or whatever. Natural selection is no, actually you don't need all that. It unfolds, naturally, and that in of itself is amazing. Yes.
Right. Science, my mother was a science teacher, and she was a great woman, but at a baby's age, you hold her. She held me, and she loved me, and made me grow into what I am now. But she was a science major, and in my life, I say that Sunday morning, we better get to church, or we better get to the synagogue. And I say that I still believe in God, the Creator, whether he's black, white, Jewish, Chinese, Asian, any color that he wants to be, even red. And I believe in the United States. I believe in Judaism on the weekends. And science, without science, my mother's memories wouldn't be around me. She held me as a kid. A child.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's the last comment. Then we're gonna go into our Torah reading for the week.
Yeah, and I really like the parallel that you brought up between the kind of love and appreciation that goes into studying religious texts and I think scientific inquiry. I think both of them we see as like a form of worship. Like if you really value something, you want to immerse yourself in understanding it. And I've always felt like if I were to personify God and think about God as a creator, what would and I created this truly amazing universe. What would I want the response to be? I want people to be obsessed with appreciating it, like obsessed with understanding
Appreciating.
it.
That's good.
Photographing it. That was like the best kind of worship that we could perform. It's like being a scientist.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, there's great, people can find great beauty in things just as they are. They don't necessarily need to see that, I have like tremendous respect for that view, personally, to me, I still feel like at some point, the odds of all of it being an accident continue to add up, and it's really beautiful, but just to me, like that's where I fall. Doesn't always work for other people, but I will say that there's so much, but you can find the beauty without having to see that. Like you don't have to add God to the picture if you don't want. Clearly, in this prayer, they are.
It's not like
Yeah.
do it with different orientations. And I think that, you can see scientific authority is certainly not invalidating the presence of the divine.
Yeah, it's another favorite rabbi sermon quote about science and religion is from Einstein, which is to say there's two strategies that you can handle this. One is to believe that nothing is a miracle, and one is strategy is to believe that everything's a miracle. Also a popular sermon quote from a rabbi that maybe has been quoted to you at some time before. We're actually going to start reading the Torah now, Ralph. That's all right. Can we do that?
Yes.
Cool.
Well, I have one more thing to say.
Okay.
I believe that nothing will happen. Nothing is a miracle.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, you'll have to tell me more about that later. That's a big,
Bible study.
what?
I'll be in Bible study.
Okay, cool. So, Jan and I are reading Torah. You ready for, yeah? So, this week we read the last Torah portion of the book of Breshit, Parashat Vayechi, which means, and he lived. My favorite little factoid about this is that the only two Torah portions that have the word life in the name are about someone dying. The other one is Haye Sarah, the life of Sarah begins with her dying. This one begins with Jacob is getting ready to die. I think the number of copies that were made is a little bit small for our. Oh no! But I'm going to give you the question that we're going to put ourselves in the head of for a moment. So there is a rabbinic legend, midrash, that Joseph taught Pharaoh to speak Hebrew. Oh, that was a rock step back. I never heard that one before. And the reason why we're going to come back to is that Pharaoh didn't know Hebrew, and it was known that you couldn't be Pharaoh unless you basically spoke all the languages in the world. So we're going to talk about what this is supposed to be kind of telling us in a few moments after we've done some of the reading of the Torah. I see you left my handouts in my office, so I have to go and get them.
I could sing Torah, but I speak 6 languages.
We'll talk about this. I'm so sorry about that, friends. Very sloppy with me. Okay. As a reminder, on Open Door Shabbat, we do a slightly abbreviated Torah reading, so we can spend a little more time diving into what the text says. Yeah, come on up. Chain is like stuck. Our beautiful facility where everything works all the time. I don't understand what's going on here. This is like, what is it, another god? Oh. Oh. See, look at the things that they make the president of the synagogue do. To fix stuff like that, yeah. Apologies for the second delay. The first Torah reading is on page 305, chapter 40. What? You're close. 350, chapter 49, verse 27. Is there a person who would like to have an aliyah to the Torah this morning? Lauren? Okay, great. I don't have the cards out, so you have to rhyme your Hebrew name. V'yazor v'gim Yoshua v'losim bo v'omar amen. Akol ha'budol hindu kavod lat Torah ta'amod. Hayasara bat. Shlomo v'tova l'aliyah harishona. Baruch shenatan Torah l'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. V'yatev hadvekim Adonai Elohechem ha'ivulchem hayom. So we're on page 305, verse 27. I would never do that. Binyamin Zev. Right, that's the word you're starting with, right? Yeah, Binyamin. Okay. Is there not enough Tali then? No, you're right. I think you would oh, here it is. Oh, I made it way too complicated. Okay, page 305.
Baruch Adonai Baruch
Adonai Baruch Elam Ba'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Ba'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. Natan lanu et Toratav. Baruch Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Binyamin Zag Yitroach Baboker Yachel Ad Ba'erev Yachalev Shalom Kol Elei Shvitei Yisrael Shnei Masar
וזאת אשר ציווה לכם אביכם ויברך אותם איש אשר כברכתו ברך אותם ויצב אותם ויאמר אליהם הנה אספם אל עמי קברו איתי אל אבותיי אל המערה אשר בשדה עברון ראיתי במערה אשר בשדה מקהלה אשר על פני ממרא בארץ כנען אשר קנה אברהם את השדה מעל עפרון החיתי לחוץ הקבר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם ותצילנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Okay. Somebody knocks on the door today. I was really like worried we were going to have like nobody here this morning because it's snow and cold and whatever.
I think the bell isn't ringing.
What?
The bell isn't working, I think.
Oh, the bell isn't working. Yeah. That's like a very. Can I have a volunteer to read who wants to have the second aliyah to the Torah? Who would like to? Adam. Steph, you can go third. Okay. Here we go. Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Moed. Amen. Shama Kabru et Abraham v'et Sarah Ishto Shama Kibrot Yitzchak Rivka Ishto v'Shama Kibrato et Leah Minevis Hasadeh v'Hamar Asher Bo Me'Bnei Pei v'Yichal Yaakov l'Chseir et Banav v'Yasef Raklav el Amita v'Yasef el Amav v'Yasef El Amav.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam et tzedakenu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Torah.
Amen. Steph. Third aliyah. Top amod. Miriam Valiani Richer, Lalia Hashlishit. There we go.
Baruch atah Adonai Habarach.
Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Moed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'harbanu kol ha'amid v'natan lanu et torto. Baruch atah Adonai notei Torah.
Amen. Vayipol Yosef el banav aviv, vayechel lav, vayisak lo, vayitzav Yosef el avadav, el harofim, lachanot el aviv, vayachadnu arvim et Yisrael. Vayimlu lo arba'im yom, ki ken yimlu yemei hachatunim, vayikru otam Mitzrayim 70 yom, vayavru yemei bechito, vayedaber Yosef el beit Paro lemor imna matzati chen beinechem dibruna, v'oznei Paro lemor abi ishbiani lemor hine anochi me b'kibro asher kariti li be'eretz Canaan shama hikareni v'atza elenai para v'et avi ashuva Vayomer Paro Allah u'bor et avicha kasher hishbiti bi'acha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notei haTorah.
Amen. Yishar Kochech. Okay. Pull out your handout. And let's, so this, the passages we read this morning were about Jacob's blessings to his sons. Unfortunately, I say sons because he gives no blessing to his one daughter, Dinah, which in and of itself is problematic. It's important to note that he also has a daughter. But one of the key things that we read about today is that Jacob's body, his bones, go back to the land of Israel eventually. They don't realize how long it's going to be before they can go back, but eventually they go back. And the midrash is that basically Pharaoh actually doesn't really want to do this, to let him do this. I guess because they assume they're going to stay there forever. But he lets them do it because he doesn't want anyone to know that Joseph taught him to speak Hebrew. So, why would Pharaoh care? Kind of you're Pharaoh. Why would anyone care if they knew you don't know how to speak Hebrew? It's like a very strange thing, especially given that Hebrew, unfortunately, today and back then in the Bible, is not spoken by most people in the world. A relatively small number of people speak Hebrew. So why would the Pharaoh of Egypt need that? Yeah.
Isn't it just like power, needing to know everything and being all-knowing and being,
Okay, so speaking multiple languages is power. It's funny. Like I don't really know anyone who speaks 70 languages. I guess I've noticed some people who maybe speak like 4 or 5, which feels like an awful lot. Even just speaking, getting my English right sometimes feels hard. But like it's a lot. That's a lot. So I think you're right. There's something in here about knowledge. Like what does it mean if I can't just speak every language? Jack?
If I'm getting my Egyptian mythology right, the Pharaoh is descended or chosen by the sun god Ra. It's not only power for the sake of power, but in that if this is someone who is descended from, in their religion, his culture, the Almighty or the Holy, pointing out that he can't do something calls that into question. And that in itself creates both political weakness and personal weakness, as well as a risk to be exploited.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, and that's reflected in the in some of the texts that we have here, which is that basically like it would call him into question. But what you're raising is an even bigger one, which is if he can't do that, then nobody can do that. And this is going to come back a few times because my favorite one of this is that a couple of Torah portions from now, we're going to read about the 10 plagues, right? And there's going to be the plague of the blood. And it's going to say that Pharaoh went down to the river of the Nile and he saw that it was all blood. And there's this midrash of why does Pharaoh go down to the river? Because he could only go to the bathroom when everyone was sleeping. Because he didn't want them to know that as an ordinary human being, he had to go to the bathroom. So apparently everybody poops except for Pharaoh in the mythology of Egypt. But this is like a thing. Like this is actually a theme that's going to come back, which is this Pharaoh, and whatever pharaohs are to come, don't want people to know that they don't know things. They like actually are putting on this impression management of their power that it's sort of subtly here, but it's going to come back to bite them several centuries from now when they're fighting them in terms of slaves. But it's interesting because think about that in relation to the prayer that we just studied about Eladon, about like what's so problematic about like living your life as a human being and feeling like you actually really get it all. Like connect those two things to me. Like what lessons can we draw from like the prayer we were studying and this idea that Pharaoh doesn't even want people to know, he doesn't want to know a relatively obscure language in the grand scheme of things. Jack?
taking out for a second that the Egyptians don't have a great historical relationship with Jews, taking that out for a second, he is still a leader. Leaders are expected to care for their people. They're expected to make hundreds, not thousands of decisions that tangibly impact the lives of many people who they will never meet. That kind of power is incredible and can lead to highs, but it can also put immense pressure on a person. There is something to be said in the prayer group study that it's okay to let go. It's okay to not know things. And it's a good reminder that we are only human. There are normal limitations, and accepting those limitations can be liberating.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because I definitely have moments in my own life where I was concerned about what people would think of me if I admitted I didn't know something or know how to do something. Ironically, I think if you were to put those other people in their shoes about what they think about me, if you were to ask them, does Josh know everything? They would be like, what are you talking about? Of course he doesn't know everything. So why was I so worried about the idea of saying I don't know something? Because no other person in the world except for me might ever believe that I could learn it all. It's funny because that like happens to us a lot. Like admitting you don't know something is hard to do under the best of circumstances. And I think that what you're saying is that as you get more powerful, it becomes even harder to admit you don't know something. Adam?
It's really interesting. I think the irony too is that the story of Joseph and Israel, the nation of Israel in Egypt is predicated on Joseph becoming an advisor, right? His whole introduction to Pharaoh is to explain something to Pharaoh that he doesn't know. So there's this tension where it's necessary, but it is also threatening.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? Yeah, the whole reason Joseph ends up on the scene is because Pharaoh can't interpret a dream. That didn't seem to be that problematic. But apparently Pharaoh needs to know Hebrew and 70 other languages to be Pharaoh. Next week, if you choose to return to our synagogue, right, we're going to talk about this idea of like the theme of like what you know or what you choose to not know. Because remember, what does it say? What it says about the Pharaoh who comes to be in the beginning of Exodus is that he didn't know Joseph. And there's this debate that like, well, does this Pharaoh not know Joseph because he's a new Pharaoh or because he chose to forget him? Because it never actually says anywhere that the old Pharaoh dies. So there's this whole thing about, and so this question of like, what do you choose to know? What do you choose not to see is really, is going to come back. Because again, Adam's right. If Pharaoh doesn't at least admit that he has these dreams he doesn't know, then how does Joseph ever come on the scene? He didn't know Joseph was there. So and that's also a thing he didn't know. He didn't know there was someone sitting in his prison who could solve all of his problems. He had to talk about it to a relatively, low-level servant in the form of his butler, to tell him that. I don't know if maybe it's not low-level, but certainly he was admitted at least to his servant. So there is something there about that lack of knowledge. I thought I saw maybe a hand as I was, Jack, again.
Just a question, forget my ignorance. Is there a sense of time that passes? We know how many years or generations between this?
Sometimes. I would say that the Torah has a very ambivalent relationship to time as we count it today. Because remember, it says that Jacob dies at 147 years old. So it's sort of hard to, it's definitely hard to count in the way that we count today. Even if you want to take everything that says literally, it raises a lot of questions. There's even like a rabbinic principle that basically is like there's no before and after in the Torah, because like once you start trying to count, you're gonna go completely berserk over trying to count this in any way that anyone else. That is my internal monologue talking. But going back to the Pharaoh, like, part of the reason I'm sharing is that, like, the very idea that the way that the Israelites end up in Egypt is by interacting with someone who is supposed to be knowing all these things that can't possibly be known by one person, is going to come back. It raises the question. I'm not going to ask you to name specific people, but there are like metaphors of pharaohs that live in our world today. I'm not naming any names specifically. Some of them live in this country, some live in other countries. But that is a thing. And it's funny because I think that there's an absurdity that midrash I mentioned about how Pharaoh didn't want anyone to know he had to go to the bathroom is meant to show you the absurdity of the idea of a human being going to that length to show that they can do everything. They can do everything just like a god. It's like, really? Like, he doesn't even have to go to the bathroom? No one would say that. In a weird way, like today, is Maya laughing at that I'm talking about going to the bathroom? Okay. Thanks, Maya. That's fine. Okay.
You should pay attention.
That's fine. But it's a real thing, right? Because chances are, I think this is what Jack is alluding to, some of the people in Egypt might have actually believed that Pharaoh could do those things. Maybe, right? I feel like that's the way we feel about computers sometimes. But computers are just going to be able to, they can just do everything. But that they're sort of like the closest thing we have to things that we treat almost as like can know everything. Well, but I don't work in that realm. It's certainly something people talk about, but the question is like, will it? I don't know. But it's interesting because we're always kind of looking for something that has all the answers. There are some human beings in our world silly enough to try and pretend that they have all the answers. That I think we all most of us can accept is like a silly thing. But I read a lot about artificial intelligence, and there are definitely things that people believe that it will one day be able to do that feel really, really far away. Will it be able to do all those things? I don't know. It definitely could write all my sermons for me if I wanted to. I actually there are definitely been a few times, I do not share this with congregants, but I do share this with colleagues, where there'll be like a political event in the world. It doesn't always have to be about Jews or America or about Israel. It could be about anything. And I'll go into ChatGPT and I'll say, write a public statement that you can deliver to your synagogue about X or Y issue that will simultaneously, say that this is okay and this is okay and that is okay, and I will copy and paste the statement to other rabbis, and they'll be like, wow, that's kind of frightening. That's like kind of frightening how good it is. I actually will say that in the weeks after October 7th, where I felt mostly just like pain and sadness and needed like a little bit of a laugh at all kinds of statements that people put out. Some of them were ones that were like really adamantly, anti-Hamas. Some were kind of straddling a divide. Some were really anti-Israel. But I just went into ChatGPT and asked them to write it for me, and they wrote it for me in like seconds. And it was like weird how it could do that. So I don't know if that means one day that ChatGPT will, be able to cure, incurable diseases or not. But I do feel like there's always a desire to like find something that will be able to fix all the problems. I don't know if I feel better about it being that invested in a computer than I do about a person. I don't know.
AI will always look human.
And then later in the story, you get Pharaoh as just a tool, just a device used by the Hebrew God to act out this play that right, exactly. He does this kind of free will. And even with respect to his own people, it sounds like he doesn't.
Well, that is such a fantastic insight you have there, that like the person who puts on this show of I know all the languages in the world, and I don't need to go to the bathroom, and like I can do everything, is the person fittingly, in some sense, that God basically deprives at some point of the ability to have complete free will over the Israelites. I suppose that's like, in some sense, like, that is a principle of the Torah, that like what goes around comes around, often in a very literal way, so I guess it kind of makes sense, but you're right, it's like he went through his whole life believing he didn't have to be a person, or pretending he didn't be, and then eventually his ability to be a person in the form of making his own decisions is deprived to some degree, which is both, I suppose, a fitting punishment and also, you know, you're right, it's like it's not fun to like, it's not fun to have to live that life either. You know, like last night I was just like reading a magazine, and oh no, yeah. So there was anyone here like a Breaking Bad fan? Right, I have not made my way through Breaking Bad yet. I've not watched any of it, but I have some familiarity with elements of it. I know that it takes place in New Mexico. And apparently, there's a scene in Breaking Bad. I guess I saw Jack nodding if he's actually seen this show.
I've seen pieces.
Okay. There's apparently a scene in Breaking Bad where Bryan Cranston's character, Walter White, throws a pizza on the roof of his house. I have no idea why. But this.
Because wife didn't get it. Like, she didn't want any to be involved with it, so she didn't accept it. So it was his house, you know.
Oh, is that actually the reason?
And she kicked him out. Yeah, they were like separated, and she kicked out of his own house, you know. So it was there, like, he wanted just
all right
to be together, like, okay.
Thank you, Owen. So you have watched Breaking Bad. Okay, so the story that I saw yesterday was that basically like this house is an actual house owned by just a regular.
I was there actually in his house.
Oh, you have? Okay, well apparently the family that has lived in this house for like 50 years is finally selling the house. And the reason they're selling the house is because they can't live there anymore. Basically, they say like hundreds of people a day go by this house. Sometimes they throw pizzas on their roof. This is why I bring up the scene. Like they said, like
no, but they have like all of expenses. You know, it's like kind of they got money for renting they have this money, but now their life is kind of they're suffering. So they put guards maybe at walls, you know, so nobody can get inside. So they have this house very special in the neighborhood because it's the only one is very fast. It has fences all over it.
Yeah, it's a weird turn of you know, it's a much lower level of fame, of course, having a house.
They will get money for the house because it's very expensive, you know.
Right. So the house is going to probably sell for like $4 million. I heard it's like what they're putting it on the market for in an area where the houses are like a couple $100,000. But like, you know, I don't know if I really want people throwing pizzas on my houses. You know, obviously there are levels of fame that are levels above it, but like. That was a long anecdote of going back to Lindsay's point about like how kind of sad it must be to like not be able to live in your own house anymore, or not be able to like let people know that you need to go to the bathroom just like everybody else. It's kind of sad. Would have been kind of cool for the pizza on the roof, but kind of not also. Adam?
Well, to that point, like, you know, depersonalization leads to dehumanization, right? So he learns Hebrew presumably because the Israelites are a constituency worth recognizing, but then the Israelites become too large and go from this constituency to a threat, and then several pharaohs later goes to the point of, you know, killing the firstborn and enslaving them. So, you know, that all of these are what becomes a challenge to his authority, becomes a threat to his authority, and then leads to this terrible action.
Yeah, I mean, that's the midrash, that's the last one there about how the midrash that says, that's why I call it palaces in the sea. Observe that everyone who desired to be worshipped as a divine being constructed a palace for himself in the sea, i.e. like a palace that can't possibly stay up forever. So I think what I'm hearing Adam saying is like, well, if he never learns Hebrew or never just like lets them leave the land or whatever, maybe people realize that he doesn't know all the languages in the world. He can't be Pharaoh anymore. But because he learns the language of Hebrew, he keeps them around just long enough that they grow into a threat. He then mistreats them, and then their God comes along and wreaks havoc on the entire society, basically revealing him to be, revealing him not to be a god in a much more powerful way. Like,
All mythology starts with hubris.
yeah, I mean, in one of my previous like professional lives where I used to teach organizational change, I would teach people this thing that's called immunity to change. And immunity to change is all about the idea that like the real reason people don't like to change, they're protecting something, and that you have to sort of ask yourself like, what would be your biggest fear if you want to know why you're not able to like change something, why it's so hard, what you really should ask is, what would be your biggest fear if you did succeed? Because then you'll get the sense of like what you're holding on to. And in Pharaoh's sense, it's sort of like he needs to hold on to the belief that he is the God, but actually, the longer he holds on, he would have been better off admitting to people that he didn't know Hebrew, or that he has to go to battle. Because if he doesn't do that, if he admits those lower level things, then maybe his entire, all his whole army doesn't end up sinking in the sea eventually. He got in too deep into the lie.
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of like a statement about fundamentalism or like extremism in general, right? It kind of like creates its own problems, right? If you kind of allow for there to be more unknowing and allow for there to be more like differences in opinions or whatever, you don't end up getting so ratcheted into like, it has to be this way, whatever it is, whatever the like thing is, basically.
It keeps piling,
Right.
on top of everything else. And I love this metaphor, like a palace in the sea. Because in the end, you can't possibly, no one can hold on to that forever. Maybe it'll last a while, but it's not going to last it can't last forever. And when it does, the longer you let it go, the bigger the crash is going to, what's that?
Well, I can't help but see this as setting up the leader that comes to in the story as well, which is Moses, who's a leader who does not see himself as necessarily worthy of all the authority that God has endowed him with, and sees himself as like this imperfect, very human, that's the message of God. And so maybe it's showing that like, well, clearly the example of the Pharaoh and the Egyptians is a failure, but we're going to have this structure that's very different.
That's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. Like Moses doesn't want the job. Moses thinks he's the bad choice for the job. He's like, what on earth are you thinking of picking me for the job? And by the way, right, in the spirit that like history can keep repeating itself, later in Moses' life, he gets into some trouble for getting a little too distant from the people. He never becomes like Pharaoh. Let's just be clear. He dies like every other human being. He doesn't pretend that he knows all the languages in the world. But you're right. He certainly starts out as a guy being like, I don't want this job. Why could you possibly want me? That's so different than Pharaoh. Omri, you're raising your.
All right. Before because you talked about artificial intelligence. I think it can teach us what is a human, right? Because if something can be conditioned to be like a perfect human, so what are we? Are we only conditioned? stuff and they sound smart to us, so we can write something that somebody said, somebody else said, somebody else said, and we know it will sound right to these people because we know what they want to hear. So are we like conditions like the AI? Because we know how he works, you know, it is conditioned. It has so many information, you know, in data, and it works like a conditioned thing. So what's the difference? How much of us are conditioned to stuff?
And what we know is what makes us human.
Yeah, what's the difference? Like, what is the person if this conditioned machine can do a lot of stuff?
Yeah, I think for those who probably know more about this, my understanding of the way that like the text-based AI works, which like you can see on like your Gmail if you have it on there, where it's like, it basically, based on what you put in, it predicts the next most likely thing, and then the thing after that.
Right, but we are brain in some way kind of like this. We have all.
Well, right, that's so it's great. It's an interesting question because, like, you could argue that one of the most frustrating and interesting things about people is that we are somewhat unpredictable. I mean, we're predictable and we're like unpredictable because, you know, you can predict. You know that like January 20th is considered National Fall Off the Wagon Day. It's the approximate day that people have calculated when people stop following their New Year's resolutions. Now, January 20th. Yes, that is inauguration day.
This year.
Right, it's predictable, except when it's not, I suppose. Like not everybody falls off the wagon of their diet or they're going to the, you know.
But you know, it's also ChatGPT and everything. They make it also kind of random sometimes. So they tell you, don't, if I teach you all the time the same like inputs, don't give the same output. Be random. So you can make a lot of things with it, but it's also be kind of like random and surprising and make mistakes. You can make mistakes sometimes, you know? Be more human.
Sure. There was a writer for the New York Times who basically like told ChatGPT that it loved him. But basically tried to like have a romantic conversation with it, and for like 12 hours. It's this guy Kevin Roos who writes for the New York, and so you can look up that. It was dark stuff that happened long enough. Yeah.
Well, I think it should tell us what is the human, what are we, you know, all the things that's happening. Even I think the Bible itself, like, or everything that's happening is maybe it's about God and the world, but maybe it's about human beings.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. The next couple of years are going to be very interesting in that regard. It's, you know, I think from what little I understand, like we're certainly not there yet, where like you can really.
Yeah, but even so, what? Even if it will do everything, so what? Now if human beings will exist, we will exist maybe. We will just be different or whatever.
Yeah. Steph, you're raising your hand.
I just thinking about the Pharaoh piece still, and it just made me think about the times in my life where like my kids look to me as if I'm kind of a Pharaoh, and how that it's both kind of like heartbreaking to see when they realize I don't know everything, but it's also very comforting to be asked some good questions and for them to think that I have the answer. Because I'm just like, it's kind of similar to what you were saying, like.
Well, I'm not the only, you know, there are parents in the room, and everyone here was presumably raised by someone, right? You know, typically when you're a child or you're raising a child, there's both the cycle of you thinking that the people who are taking care of you know everything and how to do everything, and then at some point you realize that they don't because they're humans like everybody else. Some people go really far afield and think they know absolutely nothing. Some people, you know, find a happy medium. Parents, it's sort of like, you know, saying to your, you know, how do you deal with what you don't know to your children? You know, same thing.
It's good to know, but I think it's good for children to know that you're not all knowing, that you're imperfect.
Yeah.
Little things, every time, you know, they ask us a question like,
Yeah, ChatGPT or Claude. Yeah, although it's interesting because I think that maybe what's a little different for like little children is that they're also learning about how they're going to have to come to terms with the fact that they feel like their parents have to know. It's not even that they necessarily believe their parents know everything, it's that they feel like the answer has to be there somewhere. And so they go to their parents for it. So even if you as the parent, or I as the parent, would never tell my child, I know everything. The child feels like you kind of have to know the answer at a certain age. And it's very frustrating, for them of a certain age, certainly, to like not be able to get an answer from their.
There's a lot of disagreement about the answer.
Well, there's a lot of disagreement about the answer, yeah. Coping with uncertainty is a very tough thing. Okay. I'm so delighted that we went for so long, but it means that we're going to wrap up, because I don't want to go past noon even on our open door Shabbat, and even when I cut out parts for open door Shabbat, people are like, that's okay, all right. But I do want us to at least wrap up and also to say Kaddish. So turn your Sidurim to way ahead to Ein Eloheinu, which is on page 182. Ein Eloheinu, Ein Adonenu, Ein Malkeinu, Ein Moshienu, Mi Eloheinu, Mi Adonenu, Mi Malkeinu, Mi Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Sheiktiru Avoteinu Levanecha Et Ketoret Hasamim Ein Eloheinu, Ein Adonenu, Ein Malkeinu, Ein Moshienu. Please rise, 183 for Aleinu quietly. Aleinu Shabbat. Kakatu b'torah Adonai imloch le'olam bo'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. You may be seated. This week, the 11th day of the Hebrew month of Tevet, we observe the following yard sites this week at ACI. Dora Arian, Hinda Koppelman, Jenny Friedlander, Harry Finkelstein, Joseph N. Reddish, Ruchel Kisslinger, Benjamin L. Markowitz, Leon Geslowitz, Samuel H. Greif, Max Miller, Jenny Diner, Abraham Gedalia Cohen, Norman Kempen, Morris Alterman, Norman Weinberg, Elsie Plato, Hugo Marcus, Bessie Ostrov, Joseph Mendel Schwar, Edward Gunsberg, Samuel Sintron, the Honorable Nathan A. Goldenthal. Those are in mourning, those are observing yard site. Please rise, page 184. For mourners Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'Yamad Yivarach Yeruteh v'Yamlich Malchuteh v'Chayefon v'Yomefon v'Chayedefol B'Yisrael v'Agalav Yizman Kari v'Imru Amen Yehe Shmei Rabbah V'Darach Le'olam L'Mel Maya Yiparach v'Yishtabach v'Yipar v'Yitromam v'Yitnased v'Yitadar v'Yitaleh v'Yitalal Shmei Kutsha Briku La'ela V'Im Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tushkata v'Nechamata Damiram B'Yama V'Imru Amen Yehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen Oseh Shalom B'Mramav Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Janet, do you have announcements or? What? Okay. Good, because I left my candy in my office. I hide it so that Artie can't take it.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Hope everybody's going to stay warm this weekend. Maybe be able to make a snow wall. Snowman, but anyway. Thank you all for coming, and just wanted to let you know, we have only a couple of things. There's a board meeting on Tuesday, which has been rescheduled. It's at 8 p.m. There's a Zoom link that will be distributed in the beginning of the, before the meeting. So if you want to know more, you can ask me, or you can ask Lisa, or somebody. And we also have a great roster of activities planned. But we can always use more help and more ideas. So if you're interested in helping out and to run our community and plan events, you can join us for our monthly events committee meeting, which is a Tuesday, the second Tuesday of every month. And then look out for more open door Shabbats, which are coming up February 15th, March 8th, April 26th, May 10th, June 15th. So I encourage you to check it out. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Would you mention membership? Kind of be members if you're not.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll do that. And also, if you're not a member, it would be great for you to become a member. And if you'd like to, you can email me, if you're not a member, janet@astoriacenter.org, and we can talk through what that means and what that means for you. Hey.
Yeah, New Year means new membership dues. The circle of life, my friends. We conclude with the singing of Adon Olam on page 187. Anyone who wants to join me up here can. Page 187. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'en Hasa V'Kam Soko Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Be'acharei Yiklot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh V'hu Yiyeh V'tifara V'hu Yiyeh V'tifara V'hu Echad V'yein Sheni V'ham Shilo V'hachmira V'li Reshi V'li Tachli V'lo Ha'os V'hamisra V'lo Ha'os V'hamisra V'hu Eli V'chai Goali V'tzor Kepli V'etzara V'hu Nisi Umanos Li Menat Kosi V'yom Ekra Menat Kosi V'yom Ekra Ve'ado Hakid Ruchi V'yetishan V'yahira V'imeruki Giv'yati Adonai Li V'lo ira Adonai Li V'lo ira. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. There's a light kiddush in the auxiliary room. Hamotz, what? What? I'm in a good mood because of your shiny shirt there, Hazel, so you can have that. You can sit that blanket. Okay. I don't think it tastes any different.